Hi everyone! This week in library we're going to be reading stories about bunnies. And we're going to start with a story that I bet you've heard of before. You may have read the story before or seen the movie or sung a song about it. It's called The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. The Tale of Peter Rabbit. Once upon a time there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put into a pie by Mrs. McGregor." Then Mrs. Rabbit took her basket and umbrella and went through the wood to the baker. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away towards Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First he ate some lettuce and some French beans, then he ate some radishes. Peter ate so many radishes that he began to feel rather sick. He went to look for some parsley. But who do you think he should meet around the end of a cucumber frame? "Oh, help!" gasped Peter. "It's Mr. McGregor!" Mr. McGregor was planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, shouting, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost his shoes and ran faster on all fours. Indeed, Peter might have gotten away altogether if he had not run into a gooseberry net. "Hurry, Peter, hurry!" urged some friendly sparrows. "It's no use," sobbed Peter, trying to struggle free. "My brass buttons are all caught up." Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon Peter, but Peter wriggled free, leaving his jacket behind him. Peter rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a watering can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. "Achoo!" And Mr. McGregor was after him in no time. Peter jumped out of a window and ran off. Mr. McGregor was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Now Peter was quite lost. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas to her family. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Peter came to a pond where a white cat was staring at some goldfish. He crept away quietly. He had been warned about cats by his cousin, Benjamin Bunny. Peter went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scritch, scratch, scratch, scritch. He came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned toward Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter ran as fast as he could, slipped underneath the gate, and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. His mother wondered what he had done with his coat and shoes. I am sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave him a dose of it. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end.